I got a cease and desist letter because my wind chimes were allegedly harboring aggressive energy. No joke. That was the actual phrase. Aggressive. Energy. Like I'm summoning spirits with a $12 Home Depot impulse buy. I found the letter duct taped to my front door window, not slipped in the mailbox like a normal person would do, but dead center on the glass with so much tape it peeled off the finish. Bright pink envelope. Black Sharpie that said urgent HOA action, like it was anthrax or a subpoena from God. Inside, 3 printed pages of documented offenses. Offense number 1, unauthorized kinetic noise. Artifacts. That's what they called the wind chimes. Offense number 2, unaesthetic garden ornamentation, which I assume refers to the tiny Bigfoot statue peeking out of my hostas. Offense number 3, and I swear I am not making this up, threatening posture of porch gnome. I walked outside and there she was. Karen. No, the Karen. HOA president, Range Rover queen, walking clipboard in a tennis skirt, standing on the sidewalk with 2 of her minions in matching fleece vests, like they were about to host a TED Talk on fascism in cul-de-sacs. "You've been warned," she said, arms crossed like she just sentenced me to exile. "We've had multiple reports of discordant tones and emotional disruption from your front lawn." I blinked. "You mean the wind chimes?" She didn't flinch. "The HOA has determined that their pitch violates our community harmony policy, which is..." She handed me a laminated sheet with a color-coded sound chart. There was a section labeled soothing in green, then neutral in yellow, and then combative in red. Guess where my wind chimes landed? "Sir," she said, leaning in like she was confiding state secrets, "we believe your chimes are antagonizing the neighborhood dogs." A Yorkie barked from across the street like it was on cue. I looked down at my innocent little wind chimes, 5 metal tubes hanging from a piece of driftwood. I looked back up at Karen. "I'm not taking them down." Her eyes narrowed. "Then prepare for escalation." And just like that, she turned and walked off, leaving me on my own porch, holding a cease and desist letter for wind chimes, wondering how the hell I ended up in a suburban Cold War. The next morning, I woke up to find a noise violation citation zip-tied to my mailbox. Not in an envelope, not folded politely. No, this thing was laminated, printed in color, and sealed like a freaking restaurant menu. It said, Category C, persistent oral disturbance, chime related. They gave my wind chimes a category, like hurricanes. Jess, my wife, stood next to me in her robe, sipping coffee and squinting at the citation like it might start speaking in tongues. "Are we being gaslit by the neighborhood?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "by people who own matching monogrammed sun visors." And then we noticed something worse. The chimes were gone. Gone. Ripped right off the hook. Only the little S hook was left, spinning in the breeze like a tiny middle finger. There wasn't even a note. Just the silence of a violated porch and one very smug squirrel judging me from the railing. I turned to Jess. "They stole my damn chimes." She raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to call the police?" "I want to call the Ghostbusters," I muttered, "because clearly we're dealing with demons." I checked the camera footage. Of course, the HOA folks had figured out the blind spot in our doorbell cam. Karen's gnome patrol must have done a full recon. All I got was a blurry shoulder and what looked like a gloved hand reaching up and yanking my piece away like it owed them money. That's when I snapped. I marched down to the HOA office, which, by the way, is just a refurbished pool house behind the tennis courts, and banged on the door like I was collecting a medieval tax. Karen answered in a pastel blazer, holding a smoothie the color of regret. "You're not allowed here without an appointment," she chirped. I pointed past her toward a table inside covered in confiscated lawn decor, flamingos, solar garden lights, and my wind chimes, hanging from a clipboard stand like a trophy from a suburban safari. "You stole my property," I said. She took a slow sip of her sadness smoothie. "We reclaimed a non-compliant fixture. You were warned." "And now I'm warning you," I said, full dad voice activated. "If those chimes aren't back on my porch by sunset, I'm putting up 3 more, and I'll tune them all to F sharp. Let's see how your aura handles that." Her eye twitched. I walked away before I could get cited for emotional terrorism or something equally fake. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. This was war. And I was done playing nice. 2 days later, I came home from work to find a bright orange stake driven into my front yard. At first, I thought it was a prank. It looked like one of those little flags they use for utility lines, except this one was metal, spray-painted, and had a laminated tag dangling from it that read, "Provisional HOA boundary, pending vote." I stood there, keys still in my hand, just blinking at it. Jess came out of the house holding the mail and saw me staring. "What now?" she asked, not even pretending to hope it was something normal. "They're redrawing the map," I said flatly. She squinted at the tag. "Is that legal?" "I don't think it's even real," I said. "They just stuck a flag in my yard like they're Columbus, and this is unclaimed HOA land." That night, I did what any rational adult would do. I made 6 identical flags, all with my own custom label, Independent Free State of Chime-istan, and planted them in a circle around the HOA's stake. Each one was topped with a tiny garden gnome holding a kazoo. If they wanted turf war, I was going to make it weird. The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of furious clipboard rustling. I looked outside and saw Karen standing at the edge of the yard, flanked by her 2 loyal lieutenants, one of whom was measuring the distance between my mailbox and their fake border stake with a laser tool like he was lining up an airstrike. Karen was yelling into her phone, pacing in tight little circles like a Roomba with trauma. The moment she saw me, she pointed. "That display is a violation of Section 3B, defacement of common property," she shouted. I shouted back, "You stuck a flag in my lawn first, mine just has better branding." Jess handed me coffee through the screen door without saying a word. She was so done, she'd gone full silent support mode. That afternoon, I got a new citation. This one accused me of establishing an unrecognized micronation with disruptive implications. They literally tried to fine me for secession. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules anymore, it was about power. They didn't care if my grass was too tall or my chimes were too chimey. They wanted obedience, silence, and instead, they got me. A man with a stable job, a stubborn streak, and access to bulk novelty flag orders. Game on. So I'm sitting on the porch sipping my coffee from a mug that says, "Not today, Karen," which yes, I bought specifically for this, and I hear it. The low electric whir of surveillance. I look up. There it is, a drone. Black, obnoxiously loud, hovering maybe 20 feet above my yard like a suburban UFO. Little blinking lights, a camera gimbal, and what I'm pretty sure was a tiny HOA logo sticker on the bottom. I blinked, took a long, calm sip of my coffee, set it down, then I waved. Not a polite wave, a slow, sarcastic, "Hi, I see you and I hope your battery dies over a pond" kind of wave. The drone buzzed higher, did a little loop, then zipped directly over to the section of lawn where I'd planted the Chime-istan flags. It started doing slow, creepy figure eights like it was sniffing for communism. Jess stepped out behind me holding a cinnamon roll and already shaking her head. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." "Oh, it is," I said. "We've entered the drone warfare phase." "You know they're probably filming for evidence, right?" she asked. "Good," I said, standing up. "Let's give them a show." I walked out into the yard and did exactly what any reasonable man under aerial surveillance would do. I posed next to my gnome flags with 2 thumbs up, then dropped to one knee like I was doing a Declaration of Independence photo shoot. I even threw in a salute for good measure. Drone didn't flinch. I went inside, pulled up my laptop, and checked the FCC guidelines for drone usage in residential areas. Spoiler alert. HOA. Karen is many things, but she's not certified for commercial drone flight with recording capabilities. Especially not over private property. So I did what any American man pushed to the edge of HOA lunacy would do. I built a counter drone. Okay, built is a strong word. I taped a motion-activated sprinkler head to a tall broomstick, zip-tied it to the back deck railing, and rigged it to turn on whenever something passed in front of the motion sensor. It wasn't a missile system, but it was the most redneck Iron Dome I could afford. Next morning, the drone returned. I watched from the upstairs window like a war general. The thing did its usual creepy flyover, paused, then dipped lower, probably trying to get a better look at one of the new flags that said, "This lawn protected by sarcasm and spite." And then it happened. F-T. The sprinkler burst to life like a geyser of justice, blasted the drone with a full-power arc right to the undercarriage. The drone panicked, wobbled, spun, and dropped like a dying wasp onto the grass, little propellers twitching in defeat. Jess and I stared out the window in complete silence. Then she whispered, "You just shot down a drone with garden hose technology." "Marika," I replied. 10 minutes later, a knock. Not the doorbell, a knock, rapid, sharp, the kind that carries bad perfume and worse intentions. I opened the door. Karen was standing there in full HOA regalia, visor, clipboard, emotionally aggressive pastel. "You destroyed property," she snapped. "Nope," I said. "My sprinkler gave your illegal surveillance a bath. It didn't survive. That's nature." That drone was conducting compliance documentation. I leaned on the doorframe. Over private property, with recording gear, without consent, which, according to the FAA, she didn't let me finish. "You will receive a formal citation for obstruction of oversight and intentional vandalism." Awesome, I said. Make it pink like the last one. I'm starting a collection. Karen turned on her heel and stormed off, stomping through my grass like it personally offended her. And I swear to God, the moment her back was turned, I reactivated the sprinkler. She shrieked and bolted, ran halfway down the sidewalk like she was dodging sniper fire, clipboard soaked, visor dripping, dignity lost somewhere in the hedges. Jess appeared behind me and said, "So, we're probably getting sued." I grinned. "Yeah, but we're winning the neighborhood arms race." And in that moment, as Karen sprinted down the street with soggy rage trailing behind her, I felt it in my bones. They thought they were enforcing order, but all they were doing was waking a very petty god. The next escalation came in the form of a certified letter delivered by a guy in khakis and mirrored aviators who looked like he'd just been rejected from mall security school. He didn't even ring the doorbell, just walked up, took a photo of himself holding the envelope like it was an eviction notice on a soap opera, and slid it into our mailbox with the precision of someone who's rehearsed this in front of a mirror. I waited until he waddled back to his HOA-issued golf cart. Yes, it was still wrapped in fake community safety unit decals, and then I opened the letter. It was a formal notice of pending landscape correction. According to the HOA, my front yard was visually combative. That was the phrase, visually combative, like I'd planted cactus in the shape of middle fingers. The letter listed my unauthorized decorative elements, which included my Chime-istan flags, the gnome holding a kazoo, the solar light shaped like a pineapple, allegedly confusing to neighbors, and, my personal favorite, tone-inappropriate mulch. Apparently, the HOA board had voted that red mulch didn't match the community's seasonal palette, as if my bark chips were committing war crimes against beige aesthetics. Jess read over my shoulder, dead silent, until she just said, "They're trying to mulch shame us now?" "Yes," I said, "and I won't be bullied out of my right to festive ground cover." The notice gave me 48 hours to comply before contractors would be dispatched to conduct corrective action, which is HOA speak for, "We're gonna trespass with shovels." So I did what any emotionally stable adult under passive-aggressive siege would do. I invited the neighborhood kids over for a paint-your-own-protest gnome party. We set up a table in the driveway with paint, glitter, googly eyes, and 30 blank garden gnomes I bought in bulk from a warehouse liquidation site called Yard Rage. Kids showed up with their parents. Music played. One of the gnomes ended up with sunglasses, a protest sign, and a hot pink mohawk. We named him Gary. By the end of the day, I had a front yard filled with an army of chaotic gnome energy, some waving flags, some flipping the bird, one riding a glitter-covered rubber duck. Karen drove by during golden hour, slowed her SUV to a crawl, and just stared. I waved. She didn't wave back. Later that night, Jess leaned against the porch railing, watching the gnome army sparkle under the string lights. "You know they're going to retaliate, right?" "Oh, absolutely," I said. "And that's why I installed motion-activated speakers that play the Star-Spangled Banner anytime someone crosses the sidewalk line." She laughed, but we both knew it wasn't really a joke anymore. The HOA wasn't just annoyed, they were losing control. And people like Karen? They don't lose quietly. The next morning, I found a wheelbarrow full of bark mulch dumped across my driveway. Not on the lawn, not in a neat pile by the curb, dead center of the driveway, blocking my truck like it owed someone money. There was a laminated tag stuck into the pile with a plastic fork, seriously, and it read, HOA Landscape Correction Initiative, Phase 1. Jess opened the door, holding her coffee like it was the only thing keeping her from blacking out from rage. "They're mulching you now?" "Oh yeah," I said, kicking the pile. "This is an act of horticultural aggression." I scanned the street. No one in sight, no trucks, no cameras, just an anonymous drive-by mulch bombing HOA style. It was passive aggression disguised as landscaping, which honestly might be the most HOA thing I've ever experienced. I called the HOA number listed on the tag. Got voicemail, of course, the kind that says, "Your call is important to us," right before it disconnects you. So I handled it the only way that felt right. I spread the mulch, all of it, across the entire sidewalk strip in front of my house, yes, the HOA maintained zone, and then arranged my glitter gnome army in formation across it like they'd just claimed it in the name of lawn justice. Gary the Mohawk gnome led the charge, holding a popsicle stick spear and wearing a mini American flag as a cape. By noon, 3 cars had slowed down to take pictures. One kid on a scooter saluted. Someone yelled, "Viva la gnome front," from a passing Honda. And right as I was putting the last gnome in place, I heard it. The unmistakable squeal of a golf cart with authority issues. Karen came flying around the corner, white knuckles on the wheel, lips pursed like she just licked a lemon made of shame. She stopped, stared, pulled out her phone and started recording. I waved. She didn't wave back. That's when I knew. This wasn't just war anymore, it was performance art. 3 days after the great mulch dump, I got home from work to find a temporary construction fence zip-tied across my entire front lawn. Bright orange mesh, metal stakes hammered into the soil, a giant printed sign zip-tied to the middle that said, "Under community review, landscape rehabilitation in progress." There was even caution tape, like my yard was a crime scene and the gnomes were suspects. Jess came out onto the porch holding a beer, deadpan. "You're being fenced in now." "Yeah," I said, tossing my keys in the air. "Apparently my grass is in timeout." The whole thing looked like a failed Habitat for Humanity build. One of the gnomes had been knocked over, and someone, presumably one of Karen's clipboard crusaders, had the audacity to turn Gary around so he was facing the house. Like even the gnome was being shamed. And then I noticed it. A folded HOA notice zip-tied to my mailbox again. They'd stopped using envelopes at this point. It was just pure laminated aggression. I opened it. The new violation? Unauthorized crowd gatherings. Specifically, unregulated neighborhood events, inappropriate lawn symbolism, and excessive foot traffic stemming from decorative attractions. So now the gnomes were too popular. I was apparently in violation for having friends? Or colors? I wasn't sure anymore. The line between rules and hallucinations had officially evaporated, but I knew one thing. If they wanted to build a wall, I was going to give them a damn parade. That Saturday, I hosted the first official free lawn festival. I put it on Facebook, called it a celebration of unregulated grass, and invited the whole neighborhood. I figured maybe a few people would show. I underestimated how tired everyone was of Karen. By noon, my yard was packed. Lawn chairs, slip and slide, homemade, down with the fence signs, a toddler in a tutu riding a corgi like a rodeo queen. Someone brought a snow cone machine. Someone else brought a live band that played ska covers of 90s sitcom themes. I set up a table labeled "Decorate Your Own Protest Gnome" and ran out of supplies in an hour. Karen showed up at exactly 2:13 p.m. in a navy polo and heels, holding a clipboard and looking like a substitute principal who just caught wind of a bake sale run by anarchists. She pushed through the crowd, jaw clenched, hair frizzing from the humidity, and made a beeline for me. "This," she snapped, waving her clipboard in the air like a holy relic, "is unauthorized." I gestured around. "You mean fun?" "Yeah, sorry, didn't see that banned in the bylaws." "You are mocking this institution," she hissed. "Oh no," I said with mock horror. "Wouldn't dream of it." Just then, someone fired off a confetti cannon behind us. Karen flinched like she'd taken a sniper round. Glitter floated through the air like justice. A little girl walked up to her and offered her a sparkly gnome. Karen stared at it like it had personally insulted her ancestors. Then she spun on her heel and stormed off, heels catching in the caution tape on the way out. She almost face-planted. Someone clapped. It wasn't me. It was absolutely me. The next morning, I found the fence gone. No letter, no citation, no explanation. Just a few lonely zip ties in the grass and a single gnome, Gary, standing tall and proud in the middle of the yard, now wearing a miniature paper crown someone must have made at the festival. Jess leaned on the porch railing next to me. "Think she gave up?" "No," I said, sipping my coffee. "She's regrouping." Because people like Karen don't lose, they plot. And I had a feeling the next move was going to be the most ridiculous yet. It happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are supposed to be neutral, emotionally beige, the kind of day where the most dramatic thing that happens is running out of coffee creamer. Instead, I came home to find a 12-foot banner stretched across my front yard that said, "Notice, this property is non-compliant, under active investigation in Comic Sans." Comic Sans. I stood there, keys in hand, staring at the world's most passive-aggressive scarlet letter flapping in the breeze like HOA North Korea had claimed my lawn in the name of beige tyranny. The banner was zip-tied to 2 steel posts that someone had hammered into my lawn. One of them was already leaning like a sad little antenna trying to escape the shame. Jess pulled into the driveway behind me, took one look, and said, "Did you buy that or—" "Nope," I said. "This one's a gift, from the Ministry of Conformity." There was a smaller placard staked underneath that looked like a lost science fair project. It listed open violations, including encouraging lawn descent, intentional community destabilization, use of sarcasm in neighbor communications. Apparently, I was now a danger to the HOA ecosystem, like a sarcastic invasive species. Jess blinked at the sign. They wrote sarcasm in official language? Yep. I feel like that's a compliment. Oh, it absolutely is. I went inside, made a grilled cheese I didn't even want, and sat at the kitchen table staring out the window at the banner. I wasn't mad, not really. I was impressed. Horrified, but impressed. Karen had somehow managed to weaponize office supplies and unearned authority into something that felt like it belonged in a Cold War documentary. That night, around 9:30, I took a flashlight and walked out to inspect the banner more closely. That's when I noticed something tucked between the sign and the metal post. A manila envelope, taped there like a message from the HOA Mafia. I peeled it off, brought it inside, and opened it on the kitchen counter like it might explode. Inside was a multi-page notice of formal review. Apparently, the HOA board had initiated a Phase 2 disciplinary proceeding against me, which in Karen speak meant, "We're done with glares and passive-aggressive flyers. It's tribunal time." The letter claimed I would be required to appear before the board to answer for repeated community violations and antisocial yard behavior. Antisocial yard behavior, I said out loud. Jess nearly choked on her tea. Also included was a photo, a literal printed photo, of me sitting in my lawn chair reading a book during the Free Lawn Festival. There was a gnome on the table next to me. Someone had circled the gnome in red pen and written provocative imagery? Jess held up the photo. That's from Cheryl's Facebook. They're scraping neighborhood Facebook posts now. They're trying to build a case, I said. They're building a scrapbook, she corrected. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid of their little fake trial, but because I couldn't stop thinking, what would they pull next? HOA logic didn't follow cause and effect. It followed Karen energy, which meant the next move could be anything from a fake restraining order to a parade of volunteers dressed as shrub inspectors. Turns out, I wasn't far off. Because 2 days later, I got served. And I mean actually served. By a real third-party process server who showed up on my porch in a windbreaker and sunglasses like he was about to pitch me a bad action movie. "Are you Mr. Peterson?" he asked like there could possibly be any confusion. "I am," I said, already bracing for nonsense. He handed me an envelope, gave a little nod of sorry about this, and walked off. Jess opened it while I tried to remember how breathing worked. Inside was a notice of small claims, court filing, filed by the HOA. They were suing me for $4,600 in fines and damages. Damages for what, you ask? The list included emotional distress caused by unregulated lawn decor, interference with HOA operations, aka the sprinkler drone strike, willful mocking of community leaders in a public setting, hosting a non-permitted large gathering resulting in emotional and vehicular disruption. They included 3 screenshots of Facebook posts and 1 photo of Gary the Gnome with a party hat photoshopped onto him. I stared at the paper, then I laughed harder. Jess had to sit down. "They are suing you," she wheezed. "Over lawn sarcasm," I said. That night, I made a decision. I'd been playing defense, sprinklers, flags, gnomes. Fun? Yes. Satisfying? Oh, absolutely. But it was time to shift gears. Karen had taken this into a courtroom, which meant she just opened a door she couldn't close. Because unfortunately for her, she forgot one crucial detail. My sister's a lawyer, and not just any lawyer, a bulldog of a woman who once made a Fortune 500 CEO cry on the stand. Thanksgiving dinner at our house is half turkey, half legal precedent. I texted her a photo of the lawsuit and added, "Want to have some fun?" 3 dots appeared, then already putting on pants. Karen had officially declared war with paperwork, and I had just called in the nuclear option. Court day landed on a Wednesday. Fitting, really. Hump day, the beginning of the end. Jess and I showed up 20 minutes early with my sister in full tactical litigation mode, heels clicking like a countdown to doom, binder in one hand, iced coffee in the other. I wore my HOA is a cult t-shirt under a flannel, just in case we wanted to go full dramatic reveal. Jess brought snacks. Karen arrived 7 minutes late with 2 HOA board members in tow, both of whom looked like they were having intense spiritual regrets. She had a new clipboard, sleek, black, ominous, and a manila folder labeled Evidence Confidential. I'm guessing it contained screenshots of my gnome army and the lawn party flyer with unregulated fun in Comic Sans. The judge, a tired-looking woman with reading glasses and exactly 0 patience for nonsense, asked Karen to state her case. Karen launched into a monologue like she was auditioning for an HOA-themed true crime docuseries. She actually said the phrase cultural lawn destabilization. My sister raised an eyebrow and whispered, "Is she trying to get laughed out of the room?" "She's trying to gaslight a judge," I whispered back. "This is gonna be fun." Karen's voice cracked halfway through her PowerPoint about community standards erosion. She gestured wildly at the photo of Gary the gnome in a cape and accused me of inciting insubordination. The judge blinked slowly. "Ma'am, is this a garden figurine?" "Yes," Karen snapped, "but it's what he represents." Jess muttered, "Freedom?" Then it was our turn. My sister stood up and dropped her binder on the table with a thud that shook every folding chair in a 20-foot radius. She walked the court through the fine history, none of which were legally enforceable. Then she pulled out the drone footage, yes, we had it on a flash drive, and detailed the trespassing incidents, illegal surveillance, and the time Karen zip-tied a public shaming banner to our lawn. Karen objected. That banner was authorized by the board. To which the judge replied, "Was the board authorized to declare private property a community hazard zone?" Karen looked like she had just realized she forgot to wear pants. Then came the best part. My sister, with the smug calm of someone who's watched Law & Order for sport, said, "We'd also like to submit a petition signed by 42 residents calling for Karen's immediate removal from the HOA board, citing abuse of authority and misuse of dues for," she flipped the page, "a custom-branded drone, bulk caution tape orders, and $147 spent at a novelty banner printing company." The judge sat back, crossed her arms, and said, "I've heard enough." What followed was the single most satisfying 10 minutes of my life. The judge ruled in our favor, dismissed the HOA's claim with prejudice, and issued a temporary restraining order preventing Karen or any member of her board from entering our property without consent. Then she looked directly at Karen and said, "Ma'am, if you ever zip-tie anything to this man's lawn again, it had better be a fence you're building with a permit." Karen looked like she wanted to spontaneously combust. As we walked out of the courtroom, one of her board members trailed behind us and whispered, "Just so you know, the rest of us hated the gnome thing too." Victory never tasted so petty, so beautiful, so earned. It's been a few weeks since the trial. The gnomes are still standing, though Gary's taken a sabbatical to the backyard garden. He deserved it. The HOA hasn't tried anything since. Karen resigned for health reasons, which I assume includes the condition known as being publicly roasted in court. One of the new board members actually waved at me the other day, with a hand, not a citation. Jess and I have started referring to our front lawn as the DMZ. We planted wildflowers where the caution tape used to be, and we're letting the clover grow however it wants. I bought a new wind chime, extra jangly. It's tuned just sharp enough to be legally annoying, and every time it clinks, I smile. We got a letter from the city last week. Apparently someone, anonymous of course, tried to file a noise complaint about ongoing yard-related disturbances. I framed it. It's on the wall next to Gary's party photo. Karen's Range Rover still passes our street sometimes. Slower now, hesitant, like a raccoon that once got sprayed by a hose and hasn't quite recovered. Will she try something again? Honestly, probably, but now, I'm ready. I've got coffee, gnomes, and a sister who files cease and desists like other people send birthday cards. Let her come. The lawn remembers.